The Heisei Godzilla movies are regarded as some of the best Godzilla films to all Godzilla fans. After the Showa-era Godzilla films had ended and a 10-year hiatus had occurred, Toho decided it was time to bring back Godzilla better than ever before. The film titled The Return of Godzilla 1984 spawned an entire series of Godzilla films where Godzilla returned to his roots of nuclear destruction as well as a metaphor representing nature's wrath. With a brand new continuity and virtually sweeping the table clean, ignoring all Showa films save for the original, this series was a hit for both fans and audiences alike. Although it started to dwindle off in box office numbers after Godzilla vs. Mothra, Toho decided it was time for Godzilla to go on another hiatus before his American debut in 1998. Now, in my opinion, while some of the Heisei-era Godzilla films are kinda boring or have some meh characters and meh action sequences, especially when compared to films like the Heisei Gamera trilogy, it still is a series full of lovable moments and scenes, and I believe that despite the flaws of the Heisei-era Godzilla films, every movie has flaws, let's be real here, I've come to extremely appreciate the Heisei era for a number of many different reasons. And damn it, I want to talk about them right here and now, so let's get down to it. Now, the Heisei era Godzilla films may not have been the best in terms of characters, but one huge aspect of these films that I actually enjoy is the consistency within the characters. Instead of getting new characters each film, becoming more and more unrecognizable after every new film is released, it's honestly quite refreshing getting the same couple of characters over the course of these movies, because what that does is weave together a beautiful plot in which audiences can not only remain invested with each character and how they develop the further time goes on, but it also provides a grounded take in this world of monsters within the era itself. It's fun to see how characters are affected from one movie to another, and that's something we didn't get too much of in the previous Showa era. And so when you see Miki Sagusa, for example, finding a level of understanding with Godzilla in one film, and then in another, her getting attached to baby Godzilla and eventually becoming its guardian, it's quite invigorating. And that's not to say that most of the Heisei movies consist of the same characters, believe me, they don't. But the fact that a couple of the same human characters reappear within every couple of films is an aspect of the Heisei films that I do enjoy. And I really like seeing the effort on Toho's part to provide some kind of narrative for these characters. And the fact that they're also trying to provide character arcs across the films individually, while also balancing this with character arcs over the course of 2 or 3 films, is kind of a testament to the potential and likability that the human characters can have when the writers decide to sit down and take the time to really give us good characters. Consistency in human characters is awesome to see in the Heisei films, really any series of films period, but there is also consistency within the representations of the kaiju and Godzilla himself. Godzilla is a character in the Heisei era. He shows emotions despite the limitations of suitmation. We can tell through his actions what he's feeling. Sometimes it's sadness, other times it's pain, usually it's anger, but the fact that we're able to tell what Godzilla is feeling is honestly nothing short of an astounding feat. And as to what I was saying earlier, Godzilla's character and emotions evolve over the course of the films. He starts off as more of a Shin Godzilla-esque character that plays more like an animal. He's got migratory instincts, I guess you can say, since he follows the flock of birds. He isn't intentionally rampaging at first, he just wants to feed off nuclear reactors. He eventually gets provoked into a war with the JSDF. After he's tricked and falls into a volcano, the next film shows him coming back out and responding to Biolante's cries with curiosity, because Biolante does have Godzilla DNA after all. So there could be tons of theories as to if Godzilla felt an enemy presence and that's why he arose, or if he wanted to see if another of his kind was truly out there, which would speak to the loneliness Godzilla has felt for so long. But as the films go on, we can see Godzilla visually display more signs of anger and develop beef with the Japanese military, and that really just contrasting with the mindless animal he was presented as in 1984. When Godzilla is revealed to have a son, it's a surprise to see Godzilla play on a more fatherly role while also remaining this force of destruction he's been shown to be so far throughout the films. So there's subtle changes and shifts in his characters and undertones, yet it doesn't seem to really downgrade him as a threat to the audiences and to Japan overall in the universe. And when it all culminates in the final battle of the series, audiences get to truly experience Godzilla as a sympathetic character, when Junior is in danger and Godzilla is basically reveling in pain throughout the entire film. And like I said, it's amazing because it doesn't diminish Godzilla's allegorical nature's wrath message. Him being a father doesn't weaken the character or make him soft on the audience to the point where he's perceived as a joke like Showa was. We get to see Godzilla have sympathy, tragedy, all while encompassing the feeling of being an unstoppable threat to humanity if we keep dabbling in dangers beyond our control. And you see, what this is doing is it rounds out Godzilla's character, and it makes him much more of a complex character rather than a one-note character. And if you've ever tried writing character for giant monsters, that's really hard to do, especially when you're displaying them through suitmation, which, while an incredible art form, is still overall stiff and ultimately rubber. My point is that it's much harder to display character through the respective limitations of suitmation on top of writing for giant monsters, and the fact that the Heisei era was able to accomplish this is one of the many reasons I truly appreciate the Heisei era. With the characters having consistency in their presentations while also evolving, another aspect of these films that I like is the consistency within the stories. Story consistency is what can build or break a universe. If we look at the Showa era, it seemed as if the films didn't really have that much consistency in the stories. It did have consistency, don't get me wrong, but not to the extent that the Heisei era does. While there are continuations of where the previous films left off, such as From Raids Again to King Kong vs. Godzilla, where it's explained Godzilla is still trapped in the ice, what the Heisei era does is essentially this, but on a far larger scale. You have your continuations and the gaps between films being bridged, but you also have so much more when it comes to enemies being formed, or consequences from previous films forming into current ones. In Returns, we see Godzilla is trapped in a volcano, but in Biollante, he's shown erupting from it. You have your bridge. Whether it's in Godzilla vs. Mothra or Godzilla vs. Biollante, either Mothra or Biollante end up carrying G-cells to space, which conjoins with the black hole, thus forming Space Godzilla. And the reasons either of those two monsters were around were due to the results of humanity's actions within those two films. You got the genetic engineering from Biollante, and you got the financial greed in Mothra. In 1954, after the Oxygen Destroyer was activated, we're given the devilish abomination that is Destroya, a direct consequence of man's actions from the 1954 film Godzilla. We get to follow the growth of baby Godzilla, who becomes little Godzilla, and then eventually Godzilla Jr. You see, there's a lot more of a bridge between each film when it comes to both characters and story. Events of one movie play into another without it becoming repetitive, which is an issue I find with the current MonsterVerse movies. Not to diss on the MonsterVerse films, I love them to death, but you gotta admit they keep playing up the ancient rivalry aspect. They even do it through Mechagodzilla since they use Ghidorah's DNA from the previous film. I think it's time to start shooting for more difference, Legendary. Of course, said with love, but the point is that throughout these Heisei films, there is a lot of consistency within the stories themselves. And one last way the Heisei era has consistency is through the tones of the films. There is some incredible tone consistency that I absolutely enjoy. What the Showa era did was dramatically change tone from metaphorical destruction to campy beat-em-up movies meant for kids. And I'm not shitting on Toho for that. They did what they had to in order to keep the franchise going, and that was the only way to do it. And they still made some awesome films, some of which are my personal favorites. But after 30 years of Godzilla, eventually becoming a cult classic and gaining a following, Toho brought him back to those destructive roots, and it proved to be a success as well. But what came as a surprise to me when watching the Heisei films was if they can keep that destructive symbolic tone going throughout these films without it becoming stale. But they did it! So the fact that Toho wrote Godzilla into the symbol of destruction he has been from the start, while also fleshing out his character and further evolving him without lessening that initial metaphor of destruction, is fascinating. And considering this doesn't really become stale as the films go on, is another reason why I appreciate the Heisei Godzilla films. There's consistency within characters, stories, and tones. I've always felt that consistency is key. In order to have a successful franchise, there has to be a perfect balance within consistency in stories and characters, while also evolving and refreshing the takes of these said characters as time goes on, without jeopardizing what you've already established. And finally, the Heisei era gives us both new original monsters as well as improved monsters from previous films. The new monsters we're given are incredible. They have some amazing designs such as Biollante, Destroya, Space Godzilla, and Batra. But monsters that fans are already familiar with are given improved designs and improved characters, such as the likes of Mothra, Rodan, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, Mogira, and of course even Godzilla himself. One thing I like about the new monsters are their origins. They're written to be refreshing. Biollante is a result of genetic engineering and playing God. Destroya is a result of man's actions back in 54 with the Oxygen Destroyer. Space Godzilla is the result of either Mothra or Biollante going into space. The reason those two monsters even being around leads full circle back to man's actions. The monsters don't have bland or repetitive origins, it's all woven together to be refreshing takes on the consequences of man's actions. The monsters we're familiar with, such as King Ghidorah and Mechagodzilla, have new and original origins. Ghidorah is now the result of a mutation from alien time travelers tricking humanity. Mechagodzilla, instead of being an alien machine, is actually created by humanity to defend against Godzilla. I mean, how cool is that? Monsters like Mothra and Rodan have origins and designs that are completely revitalized. They're actually given a lot more purpose and character. On top of that, the designs of these monsters we're already familiar with are reworked as well. King Ghidorah looks much more badass and like a scaly golden demonic dragon, with visually far more impressive gravity beams on top of a larger size in comparison to Godzilla himself. Mechagodzilla, much more clunky, but full of new weapons and a more sleek mechanical design. Mothra, visually more colorful and overall more majestic and royalty-like, with a lot more weapons that make her look powerful. Rodan, smaller size, which I'm not really a fan of, but a lot more of a badass design reminiscent of the original while also being more realistic and pterosaur-like. He's lined with spikes on his back and he has an awesome fire form he takes on later in the film. Even Mogira makes it into the Heisei era, looking far cooler than he did in the Showa era. So it's awesome to see that the monsters within the Toho library were rewritten with new origins and new designs. And that's not to hate on the Showa ones. I mean, I personally like the Showa Mechagodzilla and King Ghidorah origins, and even the design for Mechagodzilla himself, than I do in the Heisei era. I prefer the size of the original Showa Rodan in comparison to Godzilla, and the physicality and overall hand-to-hand combat Mothra performed in the Showa era, rather than the mostly beam spamming she does in the Heisei era. But despite my personal preferences, it's still easy to appreciate what Toho did with putting in a lot more effort to reinvent these fan favorite characters without shitting on their original counterparts. And the new monsters we get, such as Biollante and Destroya and Space Godzilla, have become fan favorites and have awesome original origins that are creative in their own ways, and their designs are absolutely spectacular. The Heisei era is very much an amazing and underappreciated era of Godzilla films, and despite what one may think of the Heisei era, you gotta give credit where credit is due. This era does something new with both the monsters we're familiar with and ones it introduces. It does something new with Godzilla as a character. There's a lot more consistency within characters, story, and tone. The executions may not have been perfect. I mean, I have a lot of issues with these films, as many other people do, but regardless, these films deserve a lot more appreciation within the fandom. They aren't awful, they aren't absolutely terrible, they're quite decent, and some are my personal favorites of the franchise. So Toho, thank you for the Heisei era. I hope y'all enjoyed. I was originally going to start a new series after another discussion video, but I've decided that before that there are a couple discussion videos I want to make before I do get back into those newer videos and series. This was a fun one. I hope you guys all enjoyed. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more. This is King Kong 9100 signing out. Until next time, bye bye.